Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashtin Doctor, your habit coach, and today we have a very special episode. It is an episode that is very, very close to my heart because it is actually what triggered my fitness and health journey. And the word that we're looking at is burnout. Today with me, I have a psychiatrist, a coach with over 50,000 hours of one-on-one time with clients. That's an insane amount of time. So I'm extremely excited because I know that he's going to be filled with interesting stories, interesting ideas, and interesting habits for you. With me, I have Manuel Astruc, and he's our guest on the show, and I'm so excited to have this interview start. Welcome, Manuel.
Thank you so much. I'm incredibly excited to be here. It's an honor to be talking to you and your audience.
We keep putting out content like this on this channel, so please don't forget to hit subscribe and the little bell icon so you know when future videos come out.
And it's so lucky that we're in this state of corona happening, that we can actually do this interview long distance, that, video calls have become the norm. You are sitting in New York. Are you in New York right now?
Exactly. So I'm in upstate New York. I'm about 3 hours north of New York City in a small town, Saratoga Springs, New York.
Lovely. And I'm in Karjat, which is at my farm, 2 hours away from Bombay. So it's so interesting how technology is making this happen. So welcome to the show. Dr. Astruc, can you take our listeners through a little bit about your journey, how it started, and how did you get down this path towards focusing on burnout and from where it started?
So when I first start talking, the first thing that I do is I take off my psychiatry hat and I put on my coaching hat, because it's interesting. In psychiatry, we have a set of standards, and we're not supposed to self-disclose very much, which is one of the reasons that I got into coaching, because it allows me to get a lot more personal. In the psychiatrist is often pictured as holier than thou, and they don't get sick and they don't have problems, right? And we're not supposed to talk, rightly so, about our problems with our patients. But when I talk about burnout to entrepreneurs and other people, I think it's really important that they know that even someone like me with 50,000 hours of help other people, that I've had my own struggles with burnout. So it was September 2008.
Okay.
When I had a moment of good fortune. My twin sister, Magdalena, had passed away the month before. She'd had a brain tumor that she'd fought for 3 years. And she battled it incredibly bravely. And she just maintained good humor and good grace. When she was first diagnosed, I remember talking to my other siblings, and we said that out of any one of us, she was going to be the one that would have the hardest time coping with this diagnosis, because Magdalena was an accountant and she liked to have everything lined up. Everything had to be just so. And this was a curveball that was going to really change her life. And instead of getting down about it, she told us that this was actually pretty good, that she'd always wanted to be at home with her family and take care of her kids. She was a full-time worker at that point. And she said, I'm home with my kids all the time now. My family visits me all the time. My friends visit me all the time. This is actually not that bad. And after she passed away the next month, I was sitting in a dark room and her picture was across from me. And in that picture, you can't even tell that she's wearing a wig. She was going through chemo, but she's smiling and happy and radiant. And at the same time that I'm looking at this picture of her and what she's going through, I was intensely burnt out. I was emotionally exhausted. I did not feel effective at my job. And I had become very, very cynical, which are all the classic symptoms of burnout. And in that moment of time, looking at her picture and thinking, here I am healthy and alive, and my family is all around me, and I'm miserable, that I drew a line in the sand and said that, I don't know what it's going to take, but from here on out, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to enjoy the ride no matter what. And that's what started a moment of transformation that has continued over the last 12 years. It's been a great ride, and I've learned so much. And in the last 2 or 3 years, my passion has been to coach entrepreneurs and other people who are suffering from burnout. And because I think that entrepreneurs are just a remarkable set of humans. They create value, they take risks, they are under immense stress to work hard and do everything. And the world needs the entrepreneurs, right? And they all want to grow and they all want to learn. So that's how I got started on the journey.
What a beautiful story. At one end, it's your sister and her attitude, and what a beautiful attitude that was. And what I appreciated about what you said right now was that idea of drawing that line in the sand and saying this much and no further. And I will never feel like this again. I know lots of people who are at that line and they never take that, that objective of saying, I will never feel like this again. So hence they don't make that move up, right? So after that, how did you learn about specializing in this idea of burnout? And do you have a different hat when you're talking about burnout as a psychiatrist and as a coach?
Yeah, so in general, when I'm coaching on burnout, that's me in my coaching hat where I can be a lot more personal. In my psychiatric practice, I'm a full-time practitioner. I've been a solo practitioner for 20 years, and I just very recently brought on some nurse practitioners to help me out so that I could do more coaching and they can take care of the clinical load more and more. But the transformation really was that there's been 12 years of making a commitment to be happy, right? And here's the order that it has to happen, right? So step one is you have to validate your reality of where you are. So for instance, right now, there are people at home who are suffering from burnout and negative self-talk because they've been locked down and they haven't optimized their time, right? So they haven't done everything on their to-do list that they could have done, and they're feeling terrible about that. And it's, the self-talk that we have when we're high performers, we're very hard on ourselves, right? So step one is just a gentle validation of this is where I'm at, right? So I've been in lockdown, I had all these plans, I haven't hit those plans. It's okay, right? So we validate the brutal reality and we try to take the judgment and the negative self-talk out of it. It's just data, right? It's data like if your gas gauge on your car says that it's going towards empty, you don't freak out. It's just like, oh, it's going on empty. So first we validate, and then we can work on hope, we can work on change, we can work on different mindsets, but that's the order that we have to do things in. Frequently, people bypass that first step of acknowledging the reality of how things are, and they're moving straight into being positive and optimistic and things like that. And it doesn't work that well, right? So it's the story from Jim Collins, Good to Great. He talks about Stockdale, who was the highest ranking officer who was put into a prisoner of war camp in Vietnam. And he was in prison for 7 years, and he was in charge of all the men. And when he came out, he was a hero, and he actually ran as vice president with Ross Perot. But he was asked, what did you do to help your men cope with being in a prisoner of war camp? And what he said was something to the effect of there were two kinds of people. There were the people who would try to be very optimistic. We're going to be rescued next month or by Christmas or by, the following day. But they tried to be very optimistic. And he said they had a terrible time. They would get so exhausted of trying to be hopeful and having their hopes dashed. And then there were people who were more pessimistic. So this is where the idea, he says, first you have to acknowledge the brutal reality that you're in a prisoner of war camp. Nothing good about that, right? There is nothing good about being in a prisoner of war camp. Once we acknowledge that this is going to be hard and this is brutal and this is terrible, now we can work on surviving and thriving and let's wait till we get rescued and what are we going to do? But you have to put things in that order. So for me, what I started to do is first, and subsequently, I've looked back and I just happened to fall into like the right set of steps that were helpful. First, I changed my diet and I started exercising. And I just changed one meal. I changed my breakfast. I said, let me have a healthier breakfast. And then I did like literally like 2 minutes of exercise, but I did it every single day. Um,
Superb.
and from that habit, it went from, one good meal, two good meals, three good meals, and 2 minutes a day to 5 minutes a day to 15 minutes a day to a very regular exercise pattern. So that was crucial, that increased my energy and to give me some control in the situation where I was feeling very out of control, and started to get good results immediately. I also was very isolated.
Mhm.
I was working, and I still work a lot of hours. I'll start seeing patients at 7 in the morning, and I'm often seeing patients till 7 p.m. with no breaks. And
Right.
then there's an hour or two of sending in prescriptions and making phone calls to return calls. So busy, long days. And there's not a lot of time to get together with entrepreneurs or other people. But I made it a habit to have a virtual group of mentors on podcasts like this. They saved my life. Like literally, they were people who were doing things that were inspiring and
Mm.
affirming. And it gave me hope that if I continued on a path of learning and growing, that there was hope for me to make things different. So it gave me a future that was much bigger than what I had. So the physicality and the nutrition to get my body right, and then the mindsets with the podcast and the virtual mentors.
Mm.
Um, and the last piece that I did is I turned off all the news.
Ah,
So
brilliant.
I sort of took a look at, I couldn't afford negativity in my head if I was going to be enjoying the ride in any avenues of negativity that I had control over. One of my favorite things, I love sports. I love excellence in sports. So I would drive into work and listen to the morning sports talk radio. And what I had found over the years is that instead of talking about excellence and like the amazing things that humans do and the human interest stories, instead of talking about that, they were talking about the drama and, who
The
hit
gossip.
who did what, the gossip, and I guess that there's a reason for that, right? People like to hear that stuff,
Correct.
but it is a subtle priming of our brains that we can avoid. So in the same way that I avoid junk food, not 100%, but for the most part, right? In the same
Right.
way, it was very important to put up blinders to external factors of negativity for me. So that helped me with controlling the mindsets a great deal as well. And I tried a lot of different things over the last 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
finally, I was a little reluctant to step into coaching because I was
Right.
worried about what my colleagues would say. I was worried about what patients would say. I was worried about, coaching doesn't have necessarily credentials, and, there's good coaches and bad coaches, but I didn't really want to enter into that arena because of my own fears of what other people would think. And somewhere around 2018 or so, I read Brene Brown, her book, Daring Greatly. And it
Correct.
starts off with the man in the arena speech from um, oh, Theodore Roosevelt.
Roosevelt.
And that speech, where you dare greatly even if you might fail, like, and get yourself into the arena because of a cause that you believe in, that made me make a switch where I started to draw out for my patients. I started to announce and to publicize that I was going to start a coaching practice that was not medical. It was important to not have my medical license in that piece of my work, in that business.
Correct.
So it's a separate business, it's coaching, but that was what finally happened. So I'd been wanting to do it, and it took me a long time to overcome my own hurdles in my head.
What a
So,
fantastic journey.
uh,
And there were 5 important things that you mentioned. The first one was making sure that you accept what your reality today is, right? instead of thinking optimistically, instead of just dreaming about it, accept the reality as the first foundation block. The second was to create that moments of hope, right? To get that hope in saying that, the future can be better than it is right now. The third step was to make a small change in that direction, right? Many people don't start with the first one. They try the second one, definitely don't do the third one, right? They definitely don't take that first step. And I think it's so important to do that. And then you did something very, very important. You said, I need to get rid of the resistance, which was, I need to get rid of all the negativity that's surrounding me in terms of the news, so that I can focus in the direction that I'm going through. And then finally, the last part was almost a purpose-driven approach, saying that this is what I feel my greatest service could be, and you moved in that direction. Did I summarize that well? Is that the...
That's perfect, and just I would add just a little nuance. One is the commitment step, right?
Right.
Like line in the sand that you said before. There's a line in the
Correct.
sand. Like going forward, there's going to be a change, right? There's
Yes.
no coming back from that line in the sand. That was incredibly important to me. To
Yes.
do that. Yeah.
And doctor, when people think about burnout, then it's become very trivialized right now. That's the feeling that at least I have. When people on social media, on Instagram, saying, "Oh, I have a burnout," or "I have a burnout," "I have burnout." But I'm sure that there are actual signs for what is a burnout, and almost like a checklist that if you have this, probably you're going through a burnout. Start these 5 steps. What would you think that checklist would be?
Well, I'll tell you. But first, the context is that we're dealing in a society where there's a lot of judgment, right? And the fact that someone is going to have a hard time opening up their reality and their truth is a hard one. That cutting out our own judgment and the fear of judgment of others, because there is a lot of stigma. And the culture is often, just go harder,
Correct.
work harder, work faster, at all costs. So there's actually 3 symptoms that have been recently operationalized by the World Health Organization, I believe, for burnout. So the first is this physical exhaustion.
Okay.
The second is a loss of a perceived effectiveness at work. I no longer feel that effect. May not be true, but I feel like I'm just not making a difference in my world. I've lost my impact. And then the last is this snarky, cynical, negative attitude towards everything that colors your world. It's a little different than depression, and depression can coexist with burnout.
In fact, that was my next question when you mentioned the physical tiredness and that. Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So you're saying they two can exist together?
They can. You can have just burnout, or you can have burnout with depression. You can have just depression. You can have depression with burnout. Yeah.
Okay. And do you see these as early warning signs, or once they've happened, now the burnout has started? Are there early warning signs as well? Are there red flags that you should be looking for?
I think so. And as with anything, in psychiatry, there's a spectrum, right? So it's like a rainbow that, there's very light colors and then much more bold colors. And it's very hard to draw a line, like where is there an illness and where is there not. So I'll tell people, look, if you put humans and you line them up according to size, like when someone is very, very tall, we'll all agree that they're very tall. But when does it switch from average to tall, right? It's not a sharp line, but somewhere in there, we'll draw a line, just arbitrarily, right? So, and then there's early not, average, less than average. So early signs of burnout are going to be milder forms of that
Mm.
mental exhaustion, that
Mm.
sense that I'm not being effective, something's wrong,
Mm.
my attitude is going down, I'm not responding to people. And part of the challenge is that our culture in
Right.
entrepreneurship and in work, um, especially if you're a high performer, high achiever, and you're really trying to do something, climb the ladder in whatever way, it's to, when you get the early warning sign, it's
Mm.
to just power through it, right?
Correct.
So we lose our sense of introspection.
Mm.
So you can think of, I don't know, a car that starts to have a little rattle, right?
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to ignore, but it's a little rattle. And then at some point your engine falls out, right? So you had
Correct.
early warnings, but you have to be tuned in. You have to be listening. Sometimes people will start to tell you, hey, your attitude, dude, you're really
Ah.
getting, sarcastic, and you're not listening to people like you usually do. And you just kind of, barked at that secretary. You don't do that. What's going on, bud? And they'll say, nothing, right? It's just busy.
Correct.
So oftentimes that introspection is missing. So one of the things that talks like this is helpful for
Mm.
is just to increase that awareness for people, that if you're starting to have those early signs, more
Mm.
exhaustion, a loss of personal effectiveness as you're feeling it, and more cynicism, that, it starts small and then it can get to the point where people literally will get depressed, right? If it keeps going, you get depressed, and when you
Correct.
start to go in that direction, you end up with functional impairment. It's hard to get out of bed now, right?
Yes.
People are pulling into work.
Yep.
You work and you can't think. You lose your concentration, your focus. And, burnout hurts you professionally, and it also hurts your family.
Mm.
Your family suffers in silence too, or not so silent, but there's an impact 360 around you.
That's such a beautiful thing because, very often we see, especially this was what happened to me, I saw all the red flags as medals for myself because I was working hard,
Yes.
right? I saw them as badges of honor, saying that, of course, I am tired. You know how much I work? Of course, I'm going
Yes.
to be grumpy. You don't know how much I work,
Right.
right?
Right.
And it was exactly that. I'd started my own division. I started my own business, and it was part of a family business. I had to prove myself. I had to go out full guns blazing, had to be the best, and all of that. And that's when
Yes.
the burnout set in. And
Yes.
you're absolutely right. It's just one progression after another till now you're deep into it,
Right.
right?
So if on day one you had all the symptoms that you have at the end of a year and a half, you'd be like, wow, what happened? But because of that slow progression, we just accommodate, right? We accommodate. We tell ourselves, of course I'm tired, of course I'm grumpy,
Correct.
and till we can't,
Mm.
till we can't go anymore. That's the stage that I got to when
Mm.
after my sister passed away, and I was very fortunate, um, to have her memory and
Mm.
her example to say, this is not
Correct.
the way you have to live, right? You
Yes.
really don't have to live like this.
And there are so many different types of burnouts as well, right? I'm sure there's burnouts amongst entrepreneurs, which is what we were talking about. But like you just mentioned, there could be burnouts amongst caregivers as well. There could be burnouts amongst somebody who's not working but at home emotionally.
Yes.
All these would fall under the same burnout bucket, would it?
Yes. 100%. Yep. So, the progression of burnout is
Mm.
that, doing something and
Mm.
running, into the red zone all the time,
Mm.
with oftentimes, a lot of high achievement mindsets, high
Okay.
performance desires.
Mm.
Someone who is lazy, like they don't want to work, it's hard for them
Okay.
to get burnt out, right?
All right.
But
Okay. Fair.
it's really going to achieve, going to be much more impactful. You'll see it more in those very successful, very driven people because
Correct.
they don't make time for their recovery.
Mm.
I heard one of my buddies one time tell me, who's a coach for athletes and entrepreneurs, but he said that coaches for high performance athletes, like 3/4 of their job is to slow the athlete down so they don't hurt themselves, right? Because the
Correct.
athlete just wants to go so hard all the time,
Right.
that it's like, no, you can't go hard all the time. You have to like give your body time to recover and recuperate. You have to have a progression. You have to be, much more intentional and thoughtful. You can't just, go 100% every single day and not suffer, right? Something's
Correct.
going to break.
In fact, I remember this so well with one of my clients, CEO and industrialist, basically from a very, very well-to-do family. And he was just pushing 7 days a week. So I said, what would happen if you don't go to office on one of those days? Let's find out. So we knocked off one day. After a few months, we knocked off one more day. After a few months, we knocked off one more day. 4 days of going to work. And he said that nothing has changed. I was like, yeah, so what were you doing all that time at work? And it was just reining him in, because you realize where he was headed and what he's going to destroy along the way, family, friends, everything along that, right? So just reining people in sometimes makes such a big difference. I completely agree with you on this.
That's a great story. And you have two things. You have the trusting relationship with the coach, right? So there's got to be some trust if you say stop working one day, because the natural inclination is like, are you crazy? Like,
Yeah.
I can't stop working one day. Everything's going to fall apart, right? So there's got to be trust, and you have to have a client who's very coachable, right?
Yes.
And you get coachable just because you recognize that you don't have all the answers, or sometimes it's the gift of desperation and pain that makes you very coachable. It's like, nothing I'm doing is working. I'll turn it over, all right? I'll turn over the controls to my coach.
That coachability aspect is so important. Like, I know people listen to this podcast as well, and there are people who make dramatic changes in their life. So I get messages on my Instagram DMs from people saying that, I did this and I lost 20 kilos after listening to your podcast because I started following some of the habits. And then there are others who listen and don't do anything, right? There's such a difference in mindset. Is there something that is striking one mindset versus the other? Is there an aspect that we can latch onto and maybe, as coaches, start kindling that fire?
It's such an interesting question. And I don't think that there's a, perfect answer to that, because I've got friends who are burnt out, and they are so capable. Like, they could easily leave a high-paying job that is, to them, they're holding on for their retirement, right? But they could do something else, make at least as much money, and be like, their skill set is such that they would absolutely crush it as a coach, or as something else that would be much more aligned with their values and their visions. But they hang on to this idea that, I can't let go of this.
Nice.
And there's other people who they just do whatever, right? There's nothing holding them back. They get an idea and they go and they execute on it no matter what, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but they're constantly shifting and changing. And it's hard to know what the reasons for that is. There's a story that I heard once. I can't remember where I heard it. It might come to me, but the story is, it's one of my couple of stories. There's a bear that goes walking into the woods.
Okay.
And he comes onto a camp where the hunters are, and the hunters have gone, but they've left a kettle that's bubbling and boiling with stew, and it smells delicious. And the bear does what a bear does. It grabs the kettle and it starts to squeeze it. And the kettle does what the kettle that's hot does. It starts to burn the bear. So the bear only has one response that it knows. It squeezes tighter and tighter and tighter, right?
Correct.
The hunters finally, and it's getting burnt, it's getting fried. The hunters finally come into the camp and they feel sorry for the bear. And they're like, Mr. Bear, let go of that kettle. What are you doing? And the bear's like, I can't let go. If I let go, it's going to jump on my back. It's going to bite me. There's all these imaginary fears based on what the bear knows. And finally, at some point, the bear lets go. and walks away without the kettle doing anything else. But so much of what's going on that's keeping the bear just squeezing the kettle is that that's all it knows. And the
Correct.
idea of letting go is actually going to be freedom, like what your clients, like letting go of
Correct.
one day is freedom. But for many people, that you say, let go of one day, and they're like, I need another day. I need 8 days a week, not 6 days a
Give
week.
me one of yours.
Yeah, give me one of your. They really have a hard time with that switch to some other belief system that's not theirs. So I don't know that that gives us a good answer, except that we have to be working on questioning our own beliefs and having our clients question
Correct.
their beliefs. What are you missing in what you know and don't know? What are the assumptions? And it's hard, right? So change is hard. There's no way around that. Change is really hard.
Especially when it threatens your identity. I am known to be this hardworking dude, and now you're suddenly telling me not to work hard.
Yeah,
Identity change, right?
right.
So beautiful. All right, doctor. Before closing, I think it's important for us to leave the listeners with what are at least 3 or 4 habits that they can make so that they do not reach a stage of burnout, right? So we spoke about what to do if you hit the burnout part, draw lines in the sand, etc.
Yeah.
What can we do to make sure that we don't get to that stage?
There's evidence that if you're including into your days things that bring you happiness and joy, so 10%, 20% of your work life, you're strictly doing things that are enjoyable to you and are fulfilling, that can be very protective. One of the ideas that I've incorporated into my coaching is the idea of happiness, which is incredibly hard to define.
Correct.
So Tony Robbins says happiness is making progress towards your goals.
Okay.
There's a researcher from Harvard who says that, his name is Sean Aker. He says, happiness is the feeling of joy that you get as you strive to fulfill your potential.
Interesting.
For me, there's 2 pieces to happiness. Number one is an idea that we're never finished products, right?
Right.
There's always room for introspection, learning, and growing. And then the second piece is to become a trailblazer, to really understand what your next act is, right? Who are you becoming? What's that next level of growth internally for you? What are you aspiring to? And that is incredibly important. And then if we redefine success, Kathy Kolbe, who has the Kathy Kolbe Index, it's a online test, but she has a great definition of success that I plug every time I hear it or have a chance to. But she says, success is the freedom to be yourself, right?
Oh, nice.
And that means that you let go of what everybody else is thinking. That piece that you talk about with the identity is so much defined by what other people think, that when we take control and say, success is really the freedom to be me, that turns that around. And then the last thing that for me has been really important is to think about a position of leadership. We can lead whether we're the leaders or we're not the leaders, but the definition of leadership that I've come to develop is the idea of the leader is someone who helps more people to help more people, right? So if
Beautiful.
I'm helping people around me to grow, to change, to be more effective, doesn't matter where I am on the organizational chart, but that makes me a leader. And I think if we plug those 3 aspects into our memories and things that we think about on a regular basis, that can be protective. It can really help someone to be more intentional as they're going through their career.
Superb. So the first part, which was about understanding happiness as an idea, And
Yeah.
I've noticed that a lot of people are missing that element in their life, right? Their lives are getting too serious, right? Or they're taking themselves too seriously. So having those moments of happiness and joy, and I would love to have a discussion with you on happiness and joy maybe in the future, because I have lots of ideas on that.
Anytime. That was my first commitment, right? My first commitment is I'm going to enjoy the ride no matter what. And that's what I've been working on for 12 years. Absolutely.
I love this. So my interpretation of this when I had my burnout and I started making the change was, if I die tomorrow and I went to heaven and God said, so did you like this beautiful gift that I gave you called life? I can't go back and say it was it was okay, it was so, like what was that about? And I have to go back and say it was mind blowing, it was awesome.
Well,
And
that's
that's where for me it started.
yeah.
As you know, that you have to enjoy this. And if you're not enjoying this, what is the point of it all?
What are you doing, right? What are you doing? Yeah.
Right? What is the point? And the second point that you said, which is so important, which was have a goal and a direction, because that crystallizes the way that you look at the future. A large part of hopelessness is not being able to see a future better than right now. And if you can actually start having a goal that you're moving towards, that direction makes so much sense. So that goal as a second layer is so critical in this aspect of it. And you know, while we're discussing it, people are saying, yeah, what can I do? Is there something that you tell your coaching clients saying that every day do this one thing, every day do this one thing for sure, come what may, do this one thing?
And there's a lot of things that we incorporate, but the big ones I would say is movement, move more,
Okay.
eat better,
All right.
uh, and have a gratitude practice.
Have a gratitude practice. Three absolutely beautiful habits: move more, eat better, and a gratitude practice. Lovely. um, Dr. Astruc, is there anything else you want to say before we start closing the interview?
No,
Anything that we
so
wanted to discuss that we didn't?
sure. So this is a good place to start. If you ever want to discuss more deeply any of these concepts, Your Next Act is my coaching group, and I used to do like live workshops, and I'm just taking my workshops virtual right now. And I do one-on-one coaching with high-level people who have messes in their life that they need some help kind of getting through the weeds and getting to the next act. And then the group coaching is something that I do. You can find more information on that at Manuel, Manuel, Astruc, ASTRUC.com. And
Okay.
on Facebook, every day, Monday through Friday, before I start working, I'll do a 2 or 3 minute morning musing. And you can find that at Manuel Astruc Coaching on Facebook.
I love that.
Yeah.
Morning musing, superb. I'm going to definitely check it out. What is the best place for people to get in touch with you? Facebook is the best place, or is there any?
So either Facebook or the website has all my contact information, and it's just getting started virtually. So reach out, and I can certainly tell you the next time that we're going to be launching a program. First launch, we just completed the first launch, but if there's people who are interested in joining the program, like reach out, because we're not starting till the end of the month. So July 29th, I think. So
Lovely.
all my contact information is on the website.
And it's how long is the program for? Is there a certain duration?
So it's 90 days.
Okay.
And we have some video lessons, and every other week group coaching sessions. And the whole idea is, your next act is, what do you want in the long run? Who are you becoming? And then your next act is, what are your next action steps? And
Correct.
then your next act coaching is the engine that gets you from where you are to where you want to go. And the natural byproducts of an engine, an engine has natural byproducts of your next act is more happiness and more success.
Beautiful. I love the name, Your Next Act. Superb. Thank you so much, Dr. Astruc, for joining us today and being part of the podcast.
Well, my pleasure. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
Same here. Thank you. Thank you.